Mark Lockwood over in France. Whereabouts in France are you, Mark?
I'm in the south, actually, in the lovely bit, the bit between Bordeaux and Toulouse. I'm not obviously a French national, although I do try to be, and my French is improving. So obviously what I do is I am partaking of the local produce very much.
What passport have you got?
I'm a Brit, so I'm actually obviously now an official alien in France after Brexit. However, my partner, the lovely lady, is a French national, so we actually have an agreement between us. We have something called PAX, which means I'm almost French. I just need to get a bad attitude, that's all.
Do this a lot.
Yes, exactly, and complain about everything and the weather. It's terrible here, you know.
So ballooning, let's get back onto ballooning a little bit. We crossed paths a few times back in Dubai, back in the day. You were in Dubai 19 years. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I was, before I went to Dubai, I started ballooning in 1984, and I also started skydiving in 1984, believe it or not. But after that, in 1988, I joined a very fledgling young company, which was the Virgin Airship and Balloon Company.
Right.
Jim Branson set that up after he'd done the transatlantic crossing. Yeah. And we were an advertising and promotions agency using balloons and airships as an advertising vehicle. And I thought, I'll give it a year, see what happens. You never know. It was kind of unusual. Yeah. So 11 years later, I was still there. We were the largest ballooning operator in the world. And it was the heyday of the air shows and the ballooning shows. We would go to Bristol and be 500,000 people there at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
When's this, Mark? What year are we talking about now?
Mid-90s. Between about 1990 and 1999 was what I would classify as the heyday.
Right.
And it's the years when all the special shape balloons were there and they were hugely popular ones. Now that obviously I'm kind of a little bit responsible for because it was actually me that designed them all. So not only did I operate them, but as a designer and a creative, you're looking at Thunderbird 2 behind me here. Yeah. That's actually an original painting. And I obviously was designing balloons and then doing the operating for them as well. So it was as if I'd sort of got myself into this ideal situation where I could, do my hobby and get paid for it, which was brilliant.
How did you get into designing balloons? How did that start?
Well, I was a designer to start with. I went to St. Martin's School of Art, so it was partially that, but they didn't know that when they took me on. They knew I was just a balloonist. And I did the usual route with ballooning. You start by meeting a balloonist, and if there are 500 people in a room and one of them is a balloonist, don't worry, he'll tell you. And got to know a balloonist who lived near my parents, and I started crewing for him and got into ballooning, got into competition ballooning, went to the World Championships in Austria in 1987. And through that, met all the people in ballooning, Per Lindstrand, Don Cameron, all these big names in ballooning. And obviously, someone at Virgin decided that I was the person to go and join them. And the designing was a bonus. It was something I just did on the side, but it kind of took over. I ended up as creative director of the agency.
And so how long were you with Virgin for? And what did you do while you were there?
11 years. I was involved in all of I'd been sort of peripherally involved in the Transatlantic Challenge in 1986. But that was mainly because Virgin were one of my clients. Virgin Atlantic were one of my clients as a designer. And then when I got into ballooning in 1992, late 91, 92, Richard and Per decided they were going to fly across the Pacific in a hot air balloon. And I was the press officer in Japan on that particular project. And what you're looking at above me now is actually a piece of that balloon that flew from Japan to Canada.
Wow.
And I was able to get the guys to rescue me a piece of that, which actually came complete with bits of pine trees stuck in it when they pulled it out of the tundra near Yellowknife. So it's a bit of a souvenir that I've sort of kept over the years, being a bit of a hoarder. But basically what we would do is approach clients and ballooning and airships particularly as well were a very interesting way of advertising and promotion. There's the normal methods that you could use. You could buy advertising on TV, radio, newspapers, all that kind of thing. This is before the internet, by the way. We're talking, when pterodactyls were flying around in the sky. And as a result, we were able to measure and equate the amount of advertising that a balloon was able to generate, and then give them a equivalent cost value as if they'd spent that money in advertising. And of course, it was very cost effective. It just meant that, you know, you needed to be able to be very exact as the way that you measured the responses. So it grew from sort of 4 of us, 5 of us in an office to about 350 of us around the world. And at one point we were the largest airship operating or lighter than air operating company since the Zeppelin Corporation back in 1934. So it got very difficult with 100 balloons flying around the world in various different countries. Yeah. And it meant that I was able to travel the world and go and do exciting different things and fly over them. And someone has asked me to write a memoir about it. And if I ever get the time, I will sit down and do it. And it'll be one of those adventure horror stories about all the different things that have happened over the years and flying balloons in weird places like Colombia and West Africa and all those sort of places.
Tell me one story that springs to mind.
I took a giant whiskey bottle for White Horse whiskey on a tour of South America. Yeah. And for that, I needed a very enterprising pilot. So I took on a guy called Andy Elson. Andy had been involved in doing all the high altitude testing for Cameron balloons in the days when they were looking at doing transatlantic races and round the world attempts and things like that. Yeah. So I knew he had the nuts to be able to go out and do something in an environment where you weren't really sure what was going to happen. And we were in Asuncion in Paraguay. Ballooning had never happened in Paraguay before. And there was I turning up with this 140-foot high whiskey bottle. And the client was sure that we wanted to be able to fly over the city. So I tasked Andy with the job and said, right, you need to be able to fly over the city. And on the other side of the river, the Parana River, which flows through the middle of the city, were a series of country clubs. And I said, you know, if you can, you want to land in one of the country clubs because then you're going to get welcomed and the crew can pick you up. But unfortunately, the wind died. And just at the edge of the river was this large green swathe. So he landed on this thinking it was grass. And it actually turned out to be floating weed. Oh, wow. It was like, just floating on the surface. So it was able to hold the balloon, but he couldn't actually get to it. So he bravely packed the balloon up and the basket and everything else, and then rolled them off the side into the river, and then swam with them and floated round to the side and got to a landing jetty where we could get him out of the water. And all of the local crew were standing around and applauding him for doing this. And they were saying, he's a very brave man. And I said, why is that? And he said, this Parana River, highest population of piranha fish in the whole of South America. Wow. That's the last time Andy did that. So, yeah, lots of those sort of things going on.
And then Bristol, the big balloon festival in Bristol, probably one of the biggest outside Albuquerque. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, Bristol obviously started as a club event, and it's now been going 42 years, although I think last year was a little bit of an anticlimax, and we'll come to that. And I did at least 20 of them. And Bristol was manic. I've done Albuquerque and pretty much all of the other big balloon events around the world. And Bristol is one of those ones because the popularity of ballooning in Bristol as a city, because of where Camerons were based and because of the fact that it's historically almost the home of ballooning in the UK, meant that getting in and out of the site where you've got 500,000 people trying to get in there and the traffic control and all the rest of it, and the manic craziness that used to go on in the launch field, where we would have 120 balloons and jostling for position, and we had numerous TV crews and media and everything else, and looking after sometimes up to 20, 25 balloons on that site at any one time, and all the crews and the personnel involved in doing that and looking after the media and the client guests and everything else and the hospitality was a major job. It was like Formula One. We'd effectively turned ballooning into a sort of Formula One kind of roadshow. And those events where, as I say, it's scary now because I've been contacted since then by people on Facebook who send me pictures of saying, oh yes, I was in Bristol in 1992, and they were in a pushchair. And you see these pictures of these people now who are balloonists to this day. And because of that, and because of going to Bristol, they were enthused by the ballooning activity that went on. That and the fact that we used to do somewhere in the region of 1,000 school visits a year. We used to take balloons into schools as part of the national curriculum education program for clients, where there were activities and things for the kids to do. And then we summed it up with actually a visit by the balloon and the balloon team, and the pilot would give a lecture, and then they'd inflate the balloon, normally in the school playground, or if the weather was bad, you could do it in the gym and stuff like that. So we had a huge program of visiting schools. And even to this day, I have people saying, oh, I remember when the Lloyd's TSB balloon came to my school back in, X number of years when I was in, junior school. And those people have sort of been enthused by that. And now we've got this new generation of kids coming on board. I call them kids. To me, they're kids. Who are now looking back at those days and wanting to see ballooning and air shows as they used to be back in the 1990s. Things changed. The whole of the live show event industry has changed. I've been in live show and events industries now for 40 years. So watching it over those years and seeing how things have moved on, there is now this desire for this retro view of going back to the 1990s, 1980s style of air show. You're the same as me. You've been around aviation and air shows for a long time. And you used to go to those shows to Riyadh and all these giant aviation events. And they were exciting and thrilling. And obviously since Ramstein, when that happened, all the rules came in. We still operate under very, very strict Civil Aviation Authority rules. And rightly so. I've actually was responsible for writing elements of the CAT 403, which is the rules that we operate under for an air show. And have implemented that in several A&Os around the world where we needed to do air shows and to introduce balloons to new countries where they'd never seen them before. West Africa and South America, I can think of particularly. And even in Dubai, I was involved in the early days of ballooning in Dubai, of actually getting those rules and regulations up and running so that now that there is quite a healthy ballooning community in Dubai.
Yes, there is indeed. So what was your first introduction with the people in Dubai? How did that come about?
I left ballooning. There was a reluctance to sort of move on and to evolve. So I moved on and I went back into my my other career, which was advertising, promotion and PR. And I was headhunted to go and run an advertising agency in Dubai. Which was an interesting exercise because I realized that in actual fact there was very little creativity there. It was all just cut and paste from other places, and decided no, I would go back into events. And literally the very first event I did was actually the Elaine Air Show, which was the very first Elaine Air Show back in 2003, where we brought out the utterly wing walking team, and I had pit specials doing aviation displays. We had a bunch of military jets and helicopters from the UAE military, and a team of balloonists, which was great fun. It was a very difficult event to put on. I took a skydiving team down there as well with Dave Morris from Langer, who was my skydive instructor, and an amazing team of skydivers who put on great displays there and night jumps and all sorts of other things. So it was again a great introduction for the UAE to actually see a proper air show, because they only ever had before that the Dubai Air Show, which was very much a commercial event. So there it was selling Airbuses and military airplanes. This was an air show proper. We had stunts and acrobatics and, as I say, wing walkers and all that kind of stuff going on. It was much more the theatrical side of an air show, which was great fun, but very hard work. To get that off the ground first time was an interesting experience.
And so you were there 19 years, were you out in Dubai, did you say?
Yeah, I went in 2001. I was due to go on November the 11th, 2001, but unfortunately something happened that I wasn't allowed to go for a while. So I didn't actually get there until, September the 11th, 2001. I didn't get there until November. And obviously 9/11 kind of put the squish on a lot of things. And have seen the Middle East and Dubai particularly grow immensely in that time. The sophistication from the early days when I was there. And we have this expression in Dubai that you looked around and said, I remember when all this was sand. I did remember when all of it was sand. It was kind of an explosion to see the place grow so quickly. And of course, it had growing pains. There were lots of things that didn't really work. They tend to have sorted a lot of those things out now, but it was all growing very, very quickly. And of course, grew with it and started this event management company. And there were lots of differences because there weren't really any event management companies in the country at the time. And obviously aviation and doing parachuting events, and I was using skydiving for promoting adrenaline-based products, and we were doing all sorts of other interesting things and trying to get balloons over there. And it was an interesting time because it was a learning curve. And then it all suddenly started to sort of straighten out, and we went into more what I would call mainstream events. And you and I met actually in 2011, because originally skydiving used to take place further up the coast in a place called Quain.
Indeed, yeah.
And it was only when Skydive Dubai opened up and Sheikh Hamdan, the Crown Prince of Dubai, got involved in skydiving that skydive moved into the mainstream and came down onto the coast. So for many years we were jumping way out in the boonies, and then suddenly along came Skydive Dubai, and I remember doing some of the very first early test jumps into the drop zone there.
Yes.
And in 2011, I got the job to do the opening ceremony for the Parachute Cup there.
Right.
Which was an interesting experience there because we had to build everything on site. Literally, all the infrastructure had to go in there. So it was a huge stage and lots of performers and horse shows and night jumps and all sorts of other things like that. So a great challenge. And obviously to do those sort of events when you're putting on events of that scale for 10,000 people with the VIPs and the dignitaries and the princes and everything there, you learn an awful lot. And that meant that we sort of grew as a company, and we went from 4 of us in a small office, like it did at Virgin, suddenly to 75 of us and 2 factories and making props and sets and all sorts of other things, and into licensed properties.
Which company was it, Mark? Was it?
The company's called Invent.
I know Invent.
Creative Event Solutions. So yeah. we eventually sort of moved sideways and took all the licenses for things like Warner Brothers and Hasbro. Yeah. And when they opened things like the Warner Brothers theme park, and we had the licenses for Lego, and Legoland was there, we were doing all the events and stuff for all of those, and we did all the entertainment in the initially when the Warner Brothers theme park opened, and we won a Middle East Event Award for that, which we're very proud of. Yeah. We did all the giant Monopoly promotions in the malls for Hasbro, which we won an event award for that. We won many different event awards. But the biggest problem we've obviously had since March last year was the COVID pandemic. Yeah. Because that closed down all live events, and they're only really now just starting to open up, but it's still very difficult over there. But I retired over a year ago now. I'd done my time, and I moved to this beautiful part of the south of France with myself and the dogs in this lovely old converted barn.
Fantastic. So let's move on to the future a little bit, looking towards this year and this Midland event. Tell me about that, Mark.
Right. Well, the Midlands Air Festival has actually been going since 2018. So this is its 3rd incarnation. It's supposed to be the 4th, but last year was cancelled. And the first year was held at Ragley Hall near Ulster, which is a beautiful, stunning location. They moved it in 2019 up to Towcester because it clashed with another event that they had going on at Ragley. And then last year was supposed to be back at Ragley. So in 2021, from the 4th until the 6th of June, we are putting on the best air show you are ever going to see in the UK.
Wow.
Now, we've gone back to the way it used to be done in the 1990s because we've listened to what people say. And the guy who's put all this together is a wonderful chap called Trevor Graham, to whom I'm severely indebted. He and I met years and years ago because he used to do all the commentary and the PA at the ballooning events. And it was always my job to go in there and talk up the PA. So for the last events, I'm actually your official commentator. Yeah. So I have to be out there getting people excited, something you know all about, and how you get the crowd wound up. Yeah. But it's a full program of events. It's a 3-day event taking place over a weekend. As I said, Ragley Hall is an amazing, stately home, beautiful lands and grounds and property, just south of Birmingham, near the M5 and the M42.
Yeah.
And on the Friday, we have a ballooning day. So on the 4th of June, you can go down there in the morning at 6 o'clock, and the idea is there is a launch, because balloons flying early in the morning and late in the evening, because that's when the weather is best. So at 6 o'clock on the Friday morning, we're hoping to have 100 balloons. This is one of the largest events outside the US, because we have 40 special shapes.
Wow.
Now, Albuquerque, which is the world's largest ballooning event, has about 750 balloons, of which about 100 are special shapes. But no other event has this number of special shape balloons. And these are the characters and the weird and wonderful shapes that you see. As I said, some of my old friends and my old favorites are there as well, because they're ones I designed. And it's a spectacular sight. The first year at Ragley, we had perfect weather conditions. It was amazing. It's the best ballooning I'd seen, to see 100 balloons just going around and around in the air and against the perfect blue sky, perfect ballooning conditions. We pray every year that it's going to be the same. But then through the day, there are going to be other displays. There isn't an air show on the Friday. We have 3 hot air airships this time.
Oh, wow.
Which is something that people don't tend to see. They're kind of rare. Basically using the same thing as a hot air balloon to lift the balloon, but it's got an engine on the back and drives along. But there is an evening spectacular, which starts off with an evening air display. Now, I don't know if you're aware of them. The Grob display by Tim Dews, which is now he and his son, Tim and Tom. They had these aircraft covered with LED lights and pyrotechnics on the wings. And they do this beautiful display, which we tend to do to operatic music and stuff like that in the evening. And then leading into what we call Nightfire, which is a balloon night glow set to music. Again, spectacular. It's one of those things, if you've never seen a balloon night glow, you've got to go and see a balloon night glow. It makes the hair on the back of your head, if you and I had any hair on the back of our heads, it makes it stand up. And then in the evening with a massive firework display. So that's the Friday, which is more of a ballooning day. The Saturday and the Sunday, you've got a total full day of entertainment. It starts with ballooning in the morning. There are balloon flights going off at 6 o'clock in the morning. Then we get to some balloon tethering later in the morning, particularly the special shapes when they come out. Around 11 o'clock, we have the Red Devils coming in. They do their display, and of course they are the best parachute team in the world. Awesome team. And then from about 1 o'clock onwards, there is a continual running display, an air show display. Now, this goes back to the traditional air show stuff. You've got exciting things. You've got jets. We have warbirds. There is a possibility that we're going to get something really, really cool that's not actually being seen, because a lot of these old warbirds need a lot of maintenance. And so they've been, over the last few months, been in the workshop having all sorts of repairs. One I can tell you about is Sally B, one of the only last flying B-17s in the world. This is the star of the movie Memphis Belle.
Yes.
And obviously during World War II, the B-17 was the Americans' daytime bomber, and they were sending thousands across to Germany. Massive loss of life. Nighttime bombing was done by the RAF, and the Americans were all based in the UK. And the B-17 was the stalwart of that. And this is an absolute genuine B-17 from World War II. Still flying, still operating, and amazing to see. Absolutely stunning to see. The sound is incredible. 4 Lycoming engines, unbelievable sound. But we also have gyrocopters. We've got Peter Davis, who's one of the best gyrocopter pilots in the world, doing a display. Amazing display. Incredible what they can do with those. Rotary wing. We have helicopters. We have helicopters with fireworks on them, which is an interesting display. Lots of aerobatic teams. There's lots of all of the stuff that people will be more familiar with. And then in the evening, again, towards the end of the evening, there are some radio-controlled aircraft coming in. We have model balloons, which again, people don't see very often.
No.
Little model remote-controlled ones. So you have remote-controlled aircraft, remote-controlled balloons as well. And then, of course, getting to the evening time, then hopefully we'll have another balloon launch in the evening. And this is pretty much the format for both the Saturday and the Sunday. But when there's nothing going on in between, it's a full air show. You've got all the stalls and the stands and the games and the food outlets and a stage entertainment, everything to keep the whole of the family occupied for the whole of the weekend. Now, we hope, against all hope, that there will be, that the COVID vaccine will take its hold and that the pandemic will have gone by then. But we are still making sure that everything is going to be COVID compliant and COVID safe. So there will still be all those in place, but we're hoping that they won't be necessary. But it's an outdoor environment, it's an outdoor venue. And obviously one of the things we are kind of limited by is weather. We can always plan an outdoor show, and what happens if it's too windy? So we covered that as well. And we have a whole series of giant character kites that also hope to be able to do displays in the afternoons and the evenings when it's windy. But being an air show, we have to keep the airfield clear when they're doing the air displays. But we're hoping that if it's really windy and we can't actually get any balloons out, we'll still be able to entertain people with these giant character kites that will fill the field. So there is a whole gamut of things for people to do. I'm gonna push the website now, because the answer is you've got to go to the website. I think you've been and had a look. www.midlandsairfestival.com, because on there you can find all the information, all the updates, because there are still a lot of things to be announced. There are some things that I could tell you about, but I'd have to shoot you afterwards, that are still in negotiation, that we're still trying to get some really cool things that we hope we're going to be able to get to the show. And that's down to Trevor and the team to be able to sort of negotiate these things, because some of those things are still in the workshop, still being fixed. May be flying at the time, may not get their certificate of airworthiness. We're hoping that they will. It'll be cool if we can. And he told me today that there's one that I'm just hoping he's going to get, which is one of the best World War II warbirds, if we can. Obviously, there's still the Spitfires, the Hurricanes, and there's Mustangs. We've even looked at getting one of the Messerschmitt Bf 109s over, which would be great because there are a few of those still around.
Yes.
And there's a couple of shows as well where they're going to do some dogfighting and some shooting up the ground and things like that. So, as I say, it's a full-on weekend of entertainment package for people to come out and watch. And it's bring your granny, because it's one of those shows that everyone can enjoy, even the kids.
After such a long time with this COVID, lockdown for so many people, stuck indoors, looking for something to do, it just sounds like absolutely the best thing ever. It really, really does.
It's the ideal panacea to get out of this funk that we've been stuck in since March last year. I mean, we're in lockdown 3 in the UK. We're luckily only in lockdown 2. Well, we've finished lockdown 2 here in France, but there is a talk that we may go back into lockdown 3. I hope not. But the beauty of that is, of course, here in France, that you're allowed to go out to shop for essential things. Wine is considered essential, so I'm fine.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you, and I feel hopeful and fingers crossed that it almost feels like it's impossible to be outside again, but you're filling my heart with potential and possibilities. I really hope it all works out.
Well, if you can get yourself into the UK at that time, and you're allowed in, because obviously getting on a plane and coming to the UK right now is not the easiest thing in the world, but if it's all gone away by then and you're able to get across the pond, then you need to come, because you would absolutely knock yourself out at this gig. It's a great show. And as I was sort of enthused, back in 2018 when I went to it for the first time in its fledgling days, and just seeing how they were trying to get things going. And it revitalized my taste and desire for watching aviation shows again, seeing how they really used to be. Yeah. So the idea is, you've got to get out of the house, come to the Midlands Air Festival in June. You've got to go. It's a great show.
Let's make a date for it all in the diaries now, and hopefully, Mark, we'll see you there. Thanks very much for joining us on Air Sports News.
Take care. Fly safe.